Yes.
It's 7:28. I don't have a quorum.
We may be just about to get there though. I was just starting up that, and now let me check back. No, not yet. Almost though. Yeah. 7:28. I don't have a quorum. Okay, we're live on YouTube. It is possible that Randy is just iPhone. So I did see somebody in there as, oh, no, here's Randy as Randy. Okay, good. Okay. So there is quorum.
Excellent. We have a quorum.
Yes. And we are recording and, nope, sorry. Recording and streaming to YouTube.
Yeah, I still show a minute.
Here comes Jenny as well. It's taking a while for Jenny's connection to join. There we go.
Okay. I think we're ready to roll. There we go. Okay. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education, Tuesday, June the 9th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. First order of business is the approval of the minutes from the May 1st, 2020 Easton Board of Education special meeting. We also will have minutes to approve for the May 21st as well. Entertain a motion to approve the May 1 minutes as presented.
So moved. It's Randy. Second.
Want to raise your hand or?
Yep. Randy moved.
Okay.
You want me to get closer to the camera? Would that help? How about this? Is that better?
Okay, here we go.
Decorum.
Hi.
We got it.
Very good. Any discussion? No. All in favor, please raise your hand by saying aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the May 21st meeting from the Easton Board of Education. That was also a special meeting. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Aye, Gretchen.
Hi, Gretchen. Thank you for that. Do I have a second?
Second.
John, any discussion? No? Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Very good. Thank you. Okay, public comment is next. I think the way that that we need to do this today, and it's going to be hard, I'll admit that, is the public comment be limited to 2 minutes. I do have a stopwatch here. I will try to wave because I don't want to interrupt when you're speaking. I'll try to wave with 30 seconds to go to let you know that you're getting near the end. So with that as a backdrop, if we can, John,
Yep.
if you can look for raised hands.
Yep. So for anyone unfamiliar with the sort of how to raise your hand in the meeting, you should be able to show, if you click on participants, you should be able to see a list on the right-hand side of your Zoom window. And in that window, you should be able to indicate that you'd like to raise your hand. If you can't find that, just show your video and wave at us, and I'll look around the screens. But we'll give everyone a moment. I'm just looking through the screens to make sure we don't have anybody waving frantically at us.
Yep.
And I see Wendy Bowditch has her hand raised, and I am unmute. Whoop, sorry, it's jumping around. There we go. I am. You should be unmuted now, Wendy.
Terrific, thank you. I just wanted to thank Dr. McMorran for his service. I appreciated working with him when I was doing the treasury job. Don't negotiate like this with your wife, okay? And I also wanted to thank Jeff Parker for his service as chairman. When I was campaigning door to door, I found out that he had gone early in the morning to the bus stops when the buses were changing to let people know things had changed and to be there to let them know that he was there and understood their concerns, et cetera. And I was very impressed with that and how much time you had to put into that. So we thank you very much. And I'm done.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other public comment?
We have a Lara.
Having trouble getting the unmute. There we go. Yeah, I think actually the problem is it looks like Lara is not connected to audio. So there we go. So let's try that now.
Okay. There we go.
Good.
Thank you. All right. Good evening. My name is Lara Fayek. I live at 345 Wilson Road. We love SSES. We have 2 kids there right now. We love the town of Easton and our school system for so many reasons. Now is the time to make a change for our community in regards to race and our education system. I believe that the discussions of race should be held early and often so children can learn about the people around them, enhance their natural compassion, and grow their empathy. Public schools are the best place to meet, interact, work, and play with all kinds of people, and schools should be a place where diversity is embraced and emphasized in a consistent and positive manner. In the spirit of compassion and striving to improve our community, I propose that the Board of Education should create a task force designed to examine the elementary and middle school curriculum as it relates to race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The task force should highlight the strengths of our curriculum, as well as identify areas for improvement so that we can achieve an anti-racism curriculum. The task force should also identify other areas of growth, such as teacher development, so that teachers can meaningfully design and teach lessons about race. The task force should also help schools foster connection with the community to enhance the authentic application of these discussions in school to the students' everyday lives. As a high school social studies teacher who is also working on this in my own district, I would be happy to work with this task force. I've spoken to Ms. Fox Santora, and I don't want to speak for her, but we've had a discussion about this, and
you're driving to Bob's?
A really great move forward.
Bring him out.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
I see one more hand.
Hi, Pat Hamlin, 24 Old Sow Road. I have mentally written this letter in my mind over the past, 2 to 3 weeks since the last meeting. I believe you asked for feedback from parents on what's important to us. As you have some really tough decisions to make, it's all important, and that's the hard thing. I appreciate you, Board of Ed. I think that this is going to be a tough night. I do think that as I look at what was discussed last time, giving the SSES office support in the form of an admin is really important. I think the admin staff is going to need to be available more than ever. With that said, I love the fact that it's a hot school and the arts are extremely important. I can't imagine not having a media specialist. So I have no good advice and guidance, but I do thank you for being thoughtful and diligent.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Feel free to wave at us if you're having trouble raising your hand in the participant window. Okay.
Okay. Next on the agenda is board member comment. Gretchen, can I start with you?
Sure. Jeff, I would also like to thank you for all of your years of service to this board in this town. And that's all I'm going to say for the moment.
Okay. John?
Thank you, Jeff, and I know we'll have time for additional board member comment at the end. Thank you for everything you've done for this town and this board, for education in the town. Also, you know, many thanks to Tom for all the hard work that you've done. Laura, thank you for raising the issue, and I think it's something that we need to address in a serious way, and I will make sure that wherever my voice can be lent to it, that I'm raising it and making sure that we're talking about it at a minimum in the curriculum committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, and that we're giving it the serious consideration that it deserves. I also want to say I think we're in for a long night here. I know that we've been in for a long week, month, year so far, and this has been a lot. I want to take half a beat to speak to sort of ceremony. I wish that we were in person and that I was able to hand something real to Jeff, something real to Tom, to thank them for their service. And I think for many of the parents in the community, we wish that there was something that we could do that is more substantial for our 8th graders and our fifth graders. I have twin boys who are in 5th grade. I have twin nieces who are in 5th grade. I have a nephew who's in 8th grade. And we've been there since they were starting schools. Many children who are coming through 8th grade and 5th grade have been a part of our lives in very meaningful ways on soccer teams and t-ball teams and all of that. However, I think we are looking at some very hard decisions, and I think at this point the wise thing to do is to wait on the celebrations. I feel passionately that we need to have those celebrations in moments, but I think that the time is not right yet for us to have those celebrations June 16th. And I know that probably is disappointing to a lot of people, but that is the way that I feel. So that is my comment and what I wanted to get off my chest.
Thank you, John. Randy? Nothing? Okay. Katie Reed?
I think he's saying he's on mute. I think he's saying he needs
Oh,
help.
I did, but no, I'm good for now. Thank you.
All right, Katie.
I just wanted to thank you, Jeff, for all of your years on the Board of Ed and as the chair of the Board of Ed for so many years as well. I mean, you've gone above and beyond, and you've really lived and breathed the Board of Education or education in Easton. So I just want to thank you so much for that. And I'd also like to thank Laura for speaking speaking out just before. It's I mean, beyond words how important that is. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Jenny, is Jenny on? I don't.
She was. No, she was here.
Lose her?
She dropped.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, in my
Hold on, Gretchen's waving at us. She may know.
Gretchen's muted.
I need to clarify who's taking notes this meeting. Because Jenny was, I believe.
Yes, it's Jenny's to do until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
You're also recording those, so if necessary, we can
Okay.
have one of the central office secretaries go back and take notes for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Gretchen, I didn't hear that.
No, it's being recorded, so it's okay if we're not taking notes.
All right, in my comment, first, I'd like to thank my fellow board members. This has been a school year like no other. And it would have been easy to let frustration drive our decisions as we work through the challenges brought about by the pandemic. Instead, we worked diligently, planned carefully, and acted responsibly in providing the best educational opportunity for our children, while also meeting our financial obligations to our town. Second, I'd like to thank our administrators, teachers, and staff. Really a heartfelt thank you for being able to turn on a dime, learn how to teach remotely, and then do it for our kids day in and day out. Third is our central office staff, Tom McMorrin, Vicki Krams, Scott Rice, and Stephanie Pearson-Ugall, the four amigos, as I refer to them, who stood firm for all of us as we worked through the most trying time in modern educational history. And finally, to our parents and students, it took a massive effort to get this off the ground. Parents became teaching paraprofessionals, and students had to do their schoolwork in a very different way every day. So thank you for all of that. And we will now move to building administrators. I have that right? Yes, I do. Building.
Shall I start?
Yes, please do, Kim.
Thank you. I just came 30 minutes ago. My assistant principal, Michael Brownstein, hosted a rousing virtual family trivia night. And if the families that are here tonight had an opportunity to see it, I hope you do send Michael a thank you, because he spent a lot of time putting together those questions. It was such a lot of fun, Michael, so thank you for doing that. I saw a lot of smiles on kids' faces, and that's so important. Since last we spoke, I've been spending a lot of time working on placement with the classroom teachers, making some adjustments there. I spent a good amount of time. We've been interviewing for physical education. We have a 1.0 vacancy in PE, and we're prepared to make a recommendation to Dr. McMorrin to interview, hopefully soon. As well, we have been looking at 540 report cards. Michael and I spent a lot of hours really looking carefully at the composition of the narratives. Given that we're not issuing grades this semester, it was really important to us that the narratives were clear and detailed and talked about achievement, between January and March before we moved into distance learning, and then singing kids' praises, because they really were champions in this. They really had to organize themselves at home and find inspiration when computers aren't all that interactive. And I think they've done a beautiful job, and the teachers captured it really quite well in the report card. So those will be going home electronically this year to the parents. And then the only other thing I think we've been working on is getting all of the students' materials picked up, and a lot of library books returned to Samuel Staples. So for those families who don't know, our silo doors are opened Monday through Friday, 8 to 2, and parents have been dropping off kindergarten registration, library books, gifts for teachers, and Michael and I have been distributing those appropriately. So that's what's keeping us busy.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
Who? Susan, you're on mute. Okay, there you go.
Hi, everybody. Each school level has its unique challenges and difficulties during this distance learning platform. I want to acknowledge the parents and the students who worked so hard the last 3 months to continue their learning. It was hard to navigate initially, and then they overcame those difficulties and they soared. I looked at the data of the trimester that recently ended. There were 2,406 unique grades given out because every student takes 7 different graded classes. And there was not one student in our entire building who did not participate in learning this year, the last 3 trimesters, and that is tremendous. Middle school students just excelled. 88% of all the students received grades in every single subject. And a small percentage had a 1 or 2 did not participate. And I have to also thank for that engagement, the teachers, the counselors who worked daily with some students, our paraprofessionals who offered support individually to students, our specialists. The teachers created lessons that were different than they would have created in school. It engaged the students and everyone. It was a whole community effort to get this up and running and for students to have learned what they did these last 3 months. And I'm just very grateful to the entire community. I wanted to just share that Tom and I also interviewed a student resource officer to take over next year. We're in the process of getting him hired. He was referred to us by Chief Doyle, and Tom, we loved him. He's going to be a great fit. It's just not finalized yet, so I won't announce his name. I wanted to thank our custodians and our office staff who have worked so hard. In middle school, we had 320 lockers stuffed with kids' items on March 13th, and the custodians pack them up. The office staff and the custodians are getting them by schedule outside for pickup the last few weeks, and will continue next week. It's a monumental effort of organization and cooperation, and everyone is just doing a great job with that. While our building's been closed, the custodial staff is still cleaning, maintaining, and have gotten around to painting some of those really dull walls. And I've been in the building, and some of the hallways are blinding. They look so wonderful. So I just want to thank everyone for that effort as well. I'm staring at Annie Moore, who is the most creative person I think I have ever met, who has worked so hard behind the scenes to assist in all of these efforts, and also to help the teachers with anything that was happening that they had a question. She got it to me, and it was, Annie, I couldn't have done it without you, so thank you. In response to Laura, I'm not saying this just because Laura made that comment. I also wanted to report that our so what happened after the Atlanta protests began, that next morning on Saturday, our counseling staff got in motion very quickly. And they communicated with Annie and myself, and we met with them on Monday. They've been around to support students. They've loaded tons of web information on our website in the counseling page for parents to look at if they want to have conversations as well. But also I want to commend our social studies teachers across all 3 grades who provided opportunities and assignments for students to have conversations in Google Meets. That went very, very well. And I want to thank the social studies teachers and the counseling department for stepping up during this very, very tough time. John, to your comment, the opening comment of our closing ceremony, I too, along with our entire staff, are very sad about the situation for our 8th grade students. I will assure you, a ceremony that is being put together that will be sent out, and I'm going to ask the community to watch it together at 5:30 on June 16th, if you can, as if we were sitting together. It is an emotional, it is a beautiful tribute to the students. So I think we'll do as best as we can to honor them and celebrate them. And it's a beautiful celebration. And I want to thank our graduation coordinator, Brian Walsh, and I want to thank our 8th grade government advisors, Eric Delecky and David Breyer, for assisting in putting it together. It's beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion and possible action. And before we get into the status of the reopening plans, I'd like to add one more agenda item. We are in the process of a superintendent search, and we have a motion that needs to be reviewed and accepted by the board so that we can allot some money to a consulting firm to help us in our efforts to find a new superintendent. So would entertain a motion to add to the discussion and possible action letter E. And it should be entitled motion to, let's see, motion to employ superintendent search consultant.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion? I'm sure there will be when we get there. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so we'll add that, and that'll be E. Okay, status of reopening plans. I think that's Stephanie, but it might be Stephanie and Tom. Who's got the ball for that one?
So I'll start, and then Dr. Pearson-Ugal can follow up. So here we are on the 9th of June, and I'm sorry, but I cannot give the community what you want. Right now, you want a comprehensive statement about what's going to happen at the end of August. The most we can give you is our best planning for that. We are carefully tracking what's happening up in Hartford, and we are planning for multiple contingencies. It is not an either or. Either everybody's back in and we're back to where we were, or everybody's out. Those are the two ends of the frame. But we have to plan for a safe return to a building that we've made as reasonably prepared to protect our children and the staff as possible. And we also have to contemplate a continuing period of distance learning. And then in between, there could be a period of time when we're back in the building, and other times when if there's a resurgence of the infection that we have to go back to distance learning. So it's very complex right now. We're looking at the physical building to contemplate how to make the elementary and the middle and the high school safer. From the obvious stuff of putting up screens to protect the main office staff, like we've seen in so many of the stores and drive-throughs in areas we've been. But we've also thought about how to clean the building, what it means do we have to go through and unhook all of the hot air hand dryers and come up with a different way for kids to do that? This is a very complex issue, and we are both working on it ourselves and looking to Hartford for guidance. So we're going to have to continue to be in this period of not sure about where we're going to go. We run in ER9 almost 54 vehicles. And if the state tells us we have to put a monitor on every single bus or van to ensure that the kids are distanced, we're going to have to address that. If the state tells us that we have to ensure that there is a significant space between each student, and we're used to 20, 22 kids in a classroom where now we have to find 10 or 11, we're going to have to address that. If we need more space, we're going to need more people. And we're looking to Hartford for guidance, not only on how to set that up, but also how to fund it. Let me be brutal. The funding we have for the next school year is insufficient to fully implement every contingency that we will need for a return to distance learning. So we have to think about being in the building and being out of the building. We're going to need to provide additional training for our teachers and staff. That probably will come in our request to you for more release time to provide them with the teachers and staff with time to continue to collaborate. We need to make the online program more secure. So you'll hear us asking you at some point for greater filtering and more protections for our kids to keep them away from malware and malicious people. We'll need to think through what does personal protective equipment mean? How do we get a 6-year-old to behave in a very sophisticated way? And at the point we're working on this every week. We're working on winding up, as you know, the last 2 months of distance learning. We are addressing concerns that we all share now about equity and education related to race and gender and other issues of fairness. That the folks who say, oh, it's been 2 months, how come you don't have a plan? I don't have a plan. And we're going to need to continue to work through June and July and right up into August to give you the best positioning for your kids. Our criteria has got to be the safety of this community. The youngest kids we work with are 3 years old. The oldest staff member we have is in her mid-70s. So it really is a challenge to us. What do we mean when we talk about an education? And I think we've all agreed in the last 2 months, it's not reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's the whole total human being that we have the privilege to work with in their youth. And so I'll stop now, because the point I want to make is where I think all of us have got to let go of the TV drama where there's 58 minutes and in minute 40 they come up with a solution, and by the end of the show they're running the credits and we go, oh, we solved that problem. This is going to be an open-ended, complex challenge to us. And I think the question is, do we all act as caregivers and friends and neighbors and colleagues and peers and adults? And adults have got to govern their emotions and use their intellect. And so far we're doing okay with that. But there's a lot of work for us to do still. I am going to editorialize at the Easton Board of Finance meeting, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be controversial, but there was a lengthy discussion about whether or not central office could be reduced by several support staff. Do we really need 2 payroll clerks? The question was posed. Couldn't we outsource the human resources to a service? Folks, we had 11 people before we went into the crisis. And to run central office is a full day, every day, day in and day out. You layer a crisis on top of that, and we start saying, Dr. Pearson-Ugal, how come you haven't fixed the curriculum? How come you haven't increased our professional training for the staff? Why haven't you come out with a fully articulated plan for this, that, and the other thing? Here's my dream for you. Ordinary human beings in an extraordinary system. And what you have right now in Vicky and Scott and Stephanie and the people who support him are extraordinary people in an ordinary system. You've got to provide, you want to have a world-class education and educational and racial awareness, fund it. Don't add it on top of what you're already asking of these folks. I am fully in subscription to that. I think we need it, but we can't make bricks without straw. I'm going to dial back because I can see I'm telling you to be rational. I'm getting emotional, so I apologize for that. But in terms of the status of the reopening plans, I'll pass it over to Dr. Pearson-Ugal, who as Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. This is really her bailiwick and her charge.
Thank you, Tom. Steph?
Thank you. I'm going to attempt not to repeat too much of what Dr. McMorran has already shared, but I will say to the board, to the members of the community, that the reopening plan is evolving, and the absence of a final plan does not mean that there's a lack of planning. There is a tremendous amount of time spent every day, not just in central office, but in every building to use creative thinking, to use time to research, to review the facilities, to make lists, to try and document pricing. And all of those things will eventually unfold into a formal plan when we have clear parameters from the health department, from our medical advisors, from Hartford, specific information about the needs in each one of the buildings, and then also the consideration of whether the needs are consistent with what we can provide within the budget. Our planning includes both broad and expert consultation. I've heard from some people that question the constitution of our reopening committee. And so let me just be clear that the core committee waves out and in, depending on the question that is our focus in any one meeting. The group meets weekly. And so when we're discussing health and safety, our nursing coordinator is very actively involved, again, informed by health directors and informed by medical advisors, informed by the CDC. When we're talking about food service options, as we were this morning, then we bring in our food service providers. And so the core committee is really there as a group that is keeping us organized, staying on track with all of the categories, and then taking each one of the assignments each week, each topic, and then going back to the buildings to consider how are we going to answer the long list of questions that we come up with. And the work of answering those questions involves consultation with a much broader group of people. To date, we've addressed the basic safety needs, including PPEs, face shields, gloves, thermometers, the basic things that we know to get schools up and running. We have begun to either create or select training protocols. And most of that was done by our nursing coordinator, again, working with her colleagues regionally and using videos that have been released or creating videos herself. And those videos will be used to train staff, to train students, and then to provide information to parents. We focused on the readiness of our facilities, and that includes an examination of entry and exit protocols, keeping in mind the need for distancing, the readiness of bathrooms, water fountains, classroom space, hallways, main offices. We've considered food service, which includes 6 different options of how we could provide food to our students. Of the 6 options, we've pretty much boiled it down to 2. So now it's a consideration of how we could use our existing cafeterias with obviously very modified protocols for getting food, consuming food, moving through lines, et cetera, in a manner so that students are able to get the food that they need, purchase the food, but with a minimum of touch. To date, I've run 4 teacher focus groups. So at least 1 at each level, pre-K through 12. And by the end of the day tomorrow, I will have run 2 additional parent focus groups. By the end of next week, we will have run 12 focus groups. And those focus groups allow teachers and parents an opportunity to provide feedback on distance learning, and then also input regarding reopening planning. We sent a survey out to parents last Friday, late afternoon, really asking for the same information, feedback and input. And as of this morning, we had about 700 responses. So that's a terrific response rate. And I will say that just very generally speaking, the response is positive. There are definitely some areas that we need to consider in terms of growth moving forward. And I really am so grateful for the parents who took a lot of time to write thoughtful comments, and for those parents who said at the end of the survey, yes, I also would like to participate in a focus group. So those parents have been invited to focus groups, and when we close the survey this Friday, we'll be able to finish with those invitations. Let me just see. Next week, we will not be having meetings because it's the closing day of the school year for most of the buildings. But then we will move forward to consider the myriad of issues that we need to work out with respect to transportation and how we will transport students and what that will look like in terms of bus runs and cleaning, and whether we will be required to have monitors on buses. We also need to work out schedules and consider the different options. And as Dr. McMorran said, it's not necessarily an all in or an all out. We could be looking at a hybrid situation of some days in session, some days in distance learning. And again, until we get a little bit more information from above, it's hard to say that we're moving more in any one direction or another. And then finally, that small topic of curriculum and instruction. And that's something that we started working on probably last month. And our content leaders really deserve such praise. I am so appreciative of their hard work to take a hard look at the units of study and the content areas that they oversee to prioritize the priorities and really distill the core concepts and skills down to the most critical elements for our students. And moving into next year to think about what are the materials that students will need to have if we are in session that typically we might share communally, which we will not be sharing communally next year. And then what are the things that we wish that students could have at home during distance learning that perhaps we did not have an opportunity to send them home with this spring, and what could teachers use to really improve their ability to teach in a remote environment. So we will be very busy through the summer, and I will continue to provide updates to the boards and to the communities as we move forward in our planning.
Stephanie, thank you. Opening up for questions for Stephanie and or Tom from board members. Randy?
I have two quick ones, I think for Stephanie. Results from the survey and from a timing perspective, and has Hartford given you any dates on when it's a go, no go, when they're going to give you more direction? Like, okay, it's all going to be decided by August 1st, or?
I'll take the survey and I'll give Hartford to Dr. McMorran. The survey will close on Friday. And our first survey had 1,000 responses. It's Tuesday morning, we're already at 700. So I'm hoping for as robust a level of participation. And as quickly as I can summarize the survey, I will get those summaries out to all of you.
Tom?
Hartford is there isn't a timeline. They're promising us some direction within a couple of weeks. What I've heard from my participation at the state level is they're trying to think about preschool through 6th grade and 7th through 12th grade in terms of how could they get those younger kids into the schools. And in order to space them out, does that mean they have to keep the older kids on distance learning? But they're not going to, I don't believe we're going to get any executive order directing us one way or another. I think we're going to get guidance and suggestion at the local level. What I would hope is that the districts in our region in Fairfield County would collaborate to try to make a similar approach to education. Hartford is calculating. They have some of their accountants working on what additional funding would be needed and where's it going to come from? The estimates that they're working up are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. If we have to put a monitor on every bus, how's that monitor going to get paid? If we have to provide an almost one-to-one para-educator support to certified educators, how do those people get paid? I think Hartford understands it can't be placed on the local towns to suddenly come up with millions of extra dollars. So it's really complex, and they certainly are getting lots of pressure to come out with some kind of guidance. I would say within weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Jenny?
It's really a question. I think it's just a comment. I just wanted to express that I was disappointed at the way things turned out after the last time we had a tri-board meeting. It came out clearly against the idea of forming a tri-board committee because we obviously didn't want to create more work or redundancy and overburden central office. But I left that meeting with the understanding or the expectation that there would be board involvement in some way in the planning or in the committee, done so that it didn't trigger freedom of information requests, that we could still be a part of the process. And then I felt like the next day there was kind of an about face on that. And I see a lot of effort put into community information and gathering, but I don't think there's a sufficient level of board involvement at this point. So if there's a way to improve that or increase that moving forward, I personally would appreciate that as a member of the board.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? As I can't be sure, I'll just go to the other board members and ask. Gretchen, anything from you?
Nope.
Katie, anything from you? Any questions? No, I'll set. John,
No.
You're all set.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Stephanie and Tom, thank you very much. This is, well, it's an amazing process, and we certainly appreciate all the time and effort you guys are putting into it, because it's, I mean, it's one of those things, I just can't wait until September and see what the heck we're doing. I'm sure it'll be exciting. Next thing on the agenda is the finalization of the 2020-2021 budget. John, can you
Yes.
put up I'm going to, please let me direct your attention to the revised document that Scott Rice sent out to you yesterday. For the benefit of the public, we're going to put it up on the scoreboard here. While page 1 of the budget cuts are the same, you will see 2 new additions on page 2. The first, yeah, thanks, John. The first is the savings from the Keller hire of a new math teacher at Master's Step 2 instead of Master's Step 16. This change will generate a savings of $39,120. The second savings, which you could also see in red, in red type, is a savings of $2,730 from the SSCS hiring of a new physical education teacher at a Bachelor's Step 2 instead of a Master's Step 1. These 2 changes are commonly referred to as breakage, where we replace a teacher who is left with the teacher at a lower pay scale level and provided by the administration. This year, it will leave us with a balance, a positive balance of $26,546. What does that mean? Those are dollars that we can use to restore something that has been previously cut. Next, I'd like to bring you up to speed with Hang on just one second. Okay, with this money, the 26,546. One of the things that I think we all heard from Kim was the importance of the reinstatement of the office assistant to SSES. I would offer that that there be a caveat with a start date of late August, thereby reducing their total compensation for the year. That difference will allow us to reinstate a previously cut on page 1 pressure washer for $4,000, which we will surely need with the emphasis on keeping all of our bathrooms clean and sanitized. Moving on to the next topic as it relates to the budget, which is the surplus we will have at the end of this year. You may recall that heading into March, pre-COVID, we were on track to finish the year with roughly a $300,000 surplus, which represents 1.8%, meaning that we would have had spent 98.2% of our budget dollars for the year. But COVID arrived and schools closed, leaving an additional $300,000 in savings for us because obviously schools were closed, for a total of $600,000. Now, you will probably remember that that this is an increase of what had been originally discussed, which was we would be someplace between $450,000 and $550,000. So in my view, it is our right to give ourselves some wiggle room for 2021 by using a portion of these funds to pay for a couple of items that currently reside in next year's budget. You will see down at the bottom of the page for your consideration that those two items is $51,000 of those dollars be put toward the budgeted settlement that the district has been involved in, and the second $23,646 budgeted for the Samuel Staples air conditioning repairs. This will lower our expenses by $73,000, almost $74,000. And I'm sorry, it is 74,646. And that, I think, is wiggle room that we need precisely for some of the things that Stephanie and Tom were talking about. And that is that we're going to have expenses that we have not planned for. And our budget is so tight going into this year that I don't want to be in a position where we have to make further cuts into our people or our programs to meet the financial pressures that post-COVID school will look like. So I throw that out for your consideration and open it up for discussions, questions, comments.
Jeff, do we need a motion to start this? Is this and then discuss, or we're just going to discuss? We're not making a motion to change the budget, or we are, or
I don't. Given the many different ways that this can go, I don't think we need a motion right now at this point. I think it would be beneficial to discuss, come to an agreement, and then I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Okay.
Now, for people that are sitting there going, how did gee, this sounds better than what I thought I was going to hear. Also remember that we're having this discussion on June the 9th. Normally at this time, the budgets would have been, we would have had a town meeting, the budget would have been posted, it would have been voted on, and we'd be talking about something else. But because of the time that we're taking with all of this breakage which has taken place is now something that we can use to our advantage going forward.
Okay, well, I'll make a couple of comments. I mean, I think bringing the office assistant back to Samuel Staples is a good decision, and I would support that. Two other, I guess, sort of one easy one and one harder one. Where would Scott put this 74,000?
He wouldn't, well, I'll let Scott answer. I don't think he has to put it anywhere.
Can we come off of this format so that we can see everybody and not just not just a column of individuals? We can see everybody in the meeting.
Yeah, I think I can do both actually. Just one moment.
Okay.
I'm just gonna share my entire screen and then just resize these guys. Okay, so now you're seeing my screen of the videos, and then we can also, and then I'll just resize this guy too, and then we'll get a little bit of both.
Mm.
Good.
I just love Zoom meetings.
Not quite what I was looking for, but okay.
I think this is the maximum number of videos that you'll see at a time.
I know, I guess I don't know that we need to have this posted since we have copies and it's publicly available, etc. We feel like it needs to be up there.
I just want the public to be able to see what we're looking at.
To follow along, yeah.
Yeah, we showed these at our last meeting, and I wanted people to be able to see what the differences were. And so, I mean, I understand it's, there's nothing about this that is optimal, but
okay, so just to move things along here, Scott, you don't need to put this anyplace.
So I think what Jeff is recommending is that we would pay for those two items, which are currently in the 2021 budget, out of 1920 money. Therefore, they would remain undirected at the moment in 2021. They would still sit in the budget, but of course we wouldn't expend against them, and we could take a future action as we determine we need to at that time.
Okay. I guess the other one, and I'm not looking to get into any level of detail, but is there anything that the board needs to know or should know about a $51,000 budgeted settlement? Because I don't know anything about it, and that's fine if I'm not supposed to or I can't. So
I can illuminate a little bit about the financials. This was something that was semi-late breaking. It was in, I believe, the February budget discussions when we learned that in the special ed area there was a negotiated settlement, and the gross value of that settlement was $76,500. And a decision was taken at that time from a budgeting standpoint to presume we would be able to fund $25,500 of that out of 1920, and then we put the balance, the $51,000, into the budget at that time. We have the per the terms of the settlement, we have the flexibility to determine our payment schedule, and that payment schedule can be in single or several multiple payments, and those payments can be made from June 1 until September 30th. So by the terms, we have the flexibility to determine when to make those payments.
okay, terrific. And just for those following along at home, what are we sending back to the town?
The gross unexpended, I would estimate currently at 600,000. And I did
after this 600 after moving 76 or 74 around.
No, that was before that, right? So you'd knock it down by 75,000 to 525.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Thoughts? My reasoning behind bringing back the office para is our discussion at the last meeting and Kim's feeling that this was a security issue and something that would be very important for her moving forward with the amount of traffic that you get in an elementary school. And so that's why I thought it was interesting. I mean, it was almost dollar for dollar, but it was something that the administration had prioritized as their number one issue. And so therefore I thought it was appropriate for us to work at making that happen.
I'd like to hear from Kim about the idea of delaying it to the end of the summer, whether or not that, I mean, I think we've got plenty of excess funds that we don't need to worry about shifting things to adjust for that $4,000 for the pressure washer. So I'd like to hear whether or not, and just hear from the administration about what they think with regard to delaying the hire till later in the summer, because I just don't think it's, I appreciate the idea behind the maneuver, but I don't think it's necessary if they think it's important to get that person on board sooner.
Jenny, it's a non-issue because it's 10 months. They don't work in August.
Okay, well, there's the answer.
Any other questions?
So when we look at the remaining sort of the items on here, so we said, you know, take pressure washer and change that from delete to restore, change the SSES office assistant from delete to restore. And what is our, you know, when we think about those additional funds that we're shifting into this year, is that's creating 76-ish thousand, is that 76? Sorry, 74 and change in capacity. Now, we know we want to set some of that. We want to not do anything with that because we know we're going to have some expenses related to COVID and reopening, you know, putting up a, you know, plexiglass screens or whatever else.
Yeah.
But should we be looking at this list and saying, this is the spot where I think we should be unambiguous that we should restore X, Y, or Z? And having that discussion now. I mean, this is our opportunity to have that discussion, right?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So I'm not going to propose this, but I am going to say I would love to see the media center specialist restored. I would love to see the media center specialist hired as a HKMS media center specialist plus distance learning specialist who can help Stephanie, Dr. Pearson-Ugal, to, you know, do some of the heavy lifting that she needs to do. What is our capacity to bring on a consultant or someone who can help Dr. Pearson-Ugal with that? Like, what does that look like? If we wanted to bring somebody in to help, what would that look like?
Stephanie?
Is the question for me?
Yes, ma'am.
So it would be a matter of reallocating existing money that we have in our 330 consulting line. So it means that we would hire a consultant to support with distance learning instead of one of the consultants that we plan to use either for improving our STEM curriculum or to support with ongoing reading and writing, professional learning, or within our regional study group. So it's not impossible, but it's, you know, it's reprioritizing our needs and then making those decisions.
Stephanie, I think perhaps you misunderstood the question. If we carried forth $75,000 that are in essence unassigned for the 2021 year, and if we find that the cost of the COVID protections that we need to have for our schools leaves us with some of those funds still available. Would those be something that you'd be able to use as additional dollars to help in your efforts to as it relates to distant learning and just professional development in and of itself?
Well, I absolutely did misunderstand, and I'm so glad that you clarified for the better. Yes, absolutely. We can direct that money toward consulting. We've had many offers since we moved into distance learning in March from different organizations, from different individuals. In addition to that, frankly, remember, we cut the summer curriculum writing budget in half.
Yep.
So I could absolutely use simply more time for our teachers to actively participate in the process of revising curricula to support a more flexible learning environment.
Okay.
And is that hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands? I mean, does this make a dent? Can we do something meaningful with some of the money? I mean, it's not 74 because we certainly, as a responsible thing, should set some of that aside. But like what about how much do you think you would need?
10 hours is about $3,400.
Okay.
The 10 hours is one person, a little bit longer than one day, about a day and a half. So you can, extrapolate from there. I think that the amount of money that you've suggested would certainly make a meaningful dent in the work that we need to do. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Gretchen?
So there's no confusion. We're not paying a teacher $3,400 for 10 hours in the summer. What Dr. Pearson's talking about is putting together a team to work over, it's a team of people for a full day or a day and a half.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant 10 days, not 10 hours.
Right.
My mistake. Thank you.
But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're talking about is a central office budget item. We can't just say Easton's gonna give central office $10,000. You have to involve the other two boards. So
I think it depends on sort of what it's going into develop. So I think it's tricky, but like the degree to which we can help to develop the curriculum that's going to be executed next year for HKMS and SSES, I think that's certainly our responsibility.
Yeah, you could put money towards the faculty, the PD in the 1100 section of the budget just for the Staples and Keller people.
But you also have, there's an Easton tab for my part of the budget. So I have a tab in each one of the three budgets. So the both consulting, summer curriculum work, professional development, all of that is within just the Easton budget, as well as at the building level.
Yeah, but Randy, I take your point. Like we shouldn't be spending our good fortune, just to benefit, to equally benefit Reading, schools without getting our money's worth,
Gretchen, you had your hand up.
This is, I guess, for Stephanie and or Tom. Is any of the discussion surrounding, what happens next year? Is there any discussion about changes to calendars and number of school days? Because I think that potentially could affect what we do.
Well, yeah, part of what Hartford is looking at is there's right now a 180-day requirement that translates into 900 hours of instructional time. And if they determine that they're going to go to a schedule that doesn't have, all kids engaged in learning for those 180 days, there could be a waiver or a change to that. But I think we have to plan for 180 days of instruction and learning, teaching and learning.
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, if somebody else was going to say something.
Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? I sure don't want to leave anyone out.
I just have a question or a remark.
Sure.
Because I'm just wanting to make sure I'm accurately capturing the thinking as we discuss here. So I believe that the discussion at the moment was to reinstate the 10-month office assistant at Staples. So I would remove that item from this list. And then there was a discussion about reintroducing the pressure washer for 4,000.
Right.
To do that, the the reinstatement of the office assistant at Staples is almost 1-for-1 for the amount of overage that we have. So to reintroduce the pressure washer would mean I would need to make another $4,000 reduction somewhere else to meet the targeted number.
Or you could pay for it out of the unspent funds from this year. You could purchase it now.
I see. Okay, then that maybe that's the
right.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to mention the extracurricular programs for HKMS, and there's two things. One, absolutely, I mean, that is critical programs should absolutely be put back in if there's any way for us to do that. We're here on June 9th, much later than we are usually here talking about the budget and finalizing the budget. Yeah. And we still don't know whether or not we're going to be in person in September. And knowing that, I think it's probably reasonable to assume that number could be lower. We could find either additional breakage or some of the unassigned portion of the 74 could be used to fund at least a portion of that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So when I look at this, there are, the library books and the curriculum salaries and the classroom libraries and the professional development and as always, the media specialists, they're all things that I think are important. Is there a way for us to, or should we be picking some of these to say this one for sure, unambiguously, we should pick for part of that 74 tonight?
John, I would think no, only because, and it's really only because we don't know what the bill for the COVID protection is going to be, and I would hate to put people's expectations that yes, we're going to have X. And then find out that what COVID's going to cost us not only takes the 74, but challenges us on other levels to come up with additional dollars.
Okay, so how do we maintain visibility with how that progresses over time? And maybe that's a question for Tom, and maybe it's a question for you, Jeff. If in July we have a better sense, and we know that 74 unassigned can be used for X, Y, and Z, or needs to be used for X, Y, and Z. How do we maintain visibility to that? Is that just something that we're doing at each one of our board meetings?
I think so, and that it probably means, I mean, we have another board meeting scheduled for the 14th of July. We will probably, and now that would be a regular meeting because that's a bit on the schedule since the beginning. But we would then undoubtedly need an August meeting because that'll be game time, and we should know clearly how we're going to be moving forward, and therefore where these $74,000 would be best placed.
Okay.
So the monies, if they're going to remain in the two accounts they're in, there would be a transfer log that Scott would provide us at that meeting. If we don't create an account tonight that says, COVID related expenses, my only concern, and listen, I think it's safe to say all of the things on the cut list are unsatisfactory. Having said that, if we're going to have a $76,000 grab bag, I'm not in favor of that. So, and I don't think anybody's saying that, but I guess my recommendation would be, I'm take Scott's lead. If he wants to leave it in the accounts it's designated for right now, even though they've been paid for out of 1920's budget, that's fine. If he wants to create a COVID-19 or building supplies and maintenance account with an asterisk that this money is allocated to tonight, I'm okay with that too. And John, I'm cognizant of what your comment was, which is we got to keep tabs on the money, but we will by transfers.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And I think by the time we would attempt to build a holding place for it, we're very likely in that same period of time to determine what we want to do with it. I think that the timing of us determining these things, as we discussed, is going to be in 30 to 60 days. So it's not going to go anywhere. I won't expend against it. It would sit there unencumbered, and then we collectively, as a part of the budgeting and planning process, would come back and say, we recommend taking money from these certain areas and expending it, and thus in such a way, which would likely entail a transfer, because I don't know that we know exactly where it's going to go. Is it going to go to personnel? Is it going to go to facilities? Is it going to go to something else?
Can I go back to the media specialist for a second and something that John was mentioning? So previously, the media specialist that we had hired had not just the role of being the media specialist, but also had the job of leading much of the technology initiatives in the school. Am I correct, Sue? Okay. It seems to me, given the situation that we're in, we should really consider this position. If we are going to be in distance learning and we think that we could find somebody who could be that helpful to that situation, that seems like money well spent for these kids. Now, my question is, if we hire someone like that at Helen Keller, would those initiatives be able to be utilized by teachers at Samuel Staples at Well? I mean, is there some way that the learning that goes on or the role can benefit all of the educators in our K-8 system? I don't know who answers that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, absolutely. And part of that is you could structure the job position so it clearly states that, but there's no prohibition on a teacher in one building doing work for the system that gets applied in the other building. That's the question I have is how wide would the pool be? And I'm not trying to talk you out of it. I think at some point you need that media specialist, but my suspicion is that any teacher with seniority right now is not going to take a job somewhere else. So you'd be hiring someone recently certified in the area. Often media specialists are already teachers who've got certification in other areas. But if we're searching for that position, you can't do it once the school year starts. The window is from about March through the end of the summer to get people to apply and be willing to move to a new district.
I mean, I understand you would know the pool better, but to have someone actually younger who understands technology might not be.
Well, the law prohibits me from making assumptions about older employees, but yeah, point taken. We've seen certainly the contributions that the media specialists have made in Reading in the last 2 months have been very, very reliable and solid. And the science technology coordinator in Reading, Rebecca Richards, been unbelievable and unbelievably generous to teachers in Easton also. I do think where Scott was commenting is we really don't know at the moment how much more we're going to have to allocate towards getting us ready for a potential return or an actual return, and we'll know more in 30 to 60 days. So my advice would be to ultimately, before the school year starts, allocate this the 74,000, but you don't really need to do it right now because you have the amount set for the 2021 budget, and you do have a duty to itemize your estimate, but you also have the right to move funds from one area to the other. So my counsel would be leave it where it is now, and in July, or certainly I think you're going to want to have a meeting in August where you could make the decision. Now, do you need that funding? Could you put it towards recovering the extracurriculars? Could you put it towards a position? And there'd still be time in August for you to search for a media specialist.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Yep.
Yes, Jen?
Quite a few. I don't think we're doing enough. I don't think this conversation is going nearly deep enough into trying to restore things and look at programs and try to gain them back given our financial circumstances. There's previously was some support offline for looking at our health insurance reserve and possibly lowering that amount and looking at regaining some of the things that are on this list. I'd really like for us to dig into that discussion. I hear people talking about the media specialist. I was ready to let that one go. And you see Sue staring at me in the back of the head, because we've heard them speak about that before in terms of thinking that, hold off for a year just because we don't know what next year is going to be like. Things at the top of my list are SSES, going from a hot school to cutting art and music. We've often talked about our district needing to do more for students at the other end of the spectrum. I think it would be a crime to let discrete math go. I would like us to see to try to put some money towards extracurricular activities, maybe not the entire amount, but at least some. I hear what John's saying about professional development. So I just want us to keep going. I don't want this to be assumed that because we're having this is still up for discussion. I just want to make sure that everybody that's watching and the entire board knows that we're having a conversation right now, and this is not a done deal. Even though there seems to be some agreement with things that have been said so far. So I don't even know if people can hear me, but where do we go from here? Because I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. That would be highly unsatisfactory.
Well, let me give you some information about where we stand with health insurance. And Scott, obviously jump in wherever you think you need to be. The projection for where we will end up the year, and again, it's a projection, but I think at this point it's pretty solid. Is we will have a balance going into next year of about $700,000. $700,000 is at the top end of the what Brown and Brown would have offered as a reserve in a normal year. Of course, there's nothing normal about this, and I'm sure there'll be nothing normal about our insurance expenses for next year. But our average going into this year monthly is $204,000 in claims a month. So that's $612,000, and we have 700. And given that that we know that a lot of doctor's appointments were changed and knee and hip replacements were put on hold, that will undoubtedly happen over probably, well, I would think over the next 12 months. I'm pretty clear we're going to need that money. And so while
Jeff, I'm sorry, based on what? Because none of us are medical professionals. It's all speculation, just like the return to distance learning and what next year is going to look like is all speculation. Randy's we've also heard comments, the opposite or different than that that there's no way that we're gonna unless they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and every single person who is putting off a procedure goes in to get it done, that we're not gonna spend 14 or 16 months of health insurance in the course of a school year.
Jenny,
And that we're in a very unique circumstance right now,
Right.
and that we could take a reasonable, responsible amount of that excess, which is far and above the recommendation of the insurance company, and use it to get some very precious programs back on the list that we may not see again next year because things will still be financially pushed. And we know that the Board of Finance is tone deaf when we talk about restoration of things that we've lost.
there isn't, we're not sitting here with a balance that Region 9 is sitting with, which is somewhere like 1.2 million. We're talking about being at 700,000. I mean, I just gave you the detail about 3 months in reserve would be 600 and 612. 700 is not much higher than that, and certainly we're going to be looking at a different number of dollar claims next year than we are this year. This year is the lowest we've had, and my God, could be 8 or 10 years. Let me get my sheet.
Jeff, it's okay. I know what our average claims are. We've talked before about what 3 months would be.
Right, and so to say that we have all of this excess just isn't accurate. I mean, it would be nice if we did. It would be nice to be able to think that, you know, that we have maybe some little well, the little pot of gold right now is $74,000. And again, we don't know what our expenses are going to be. This is the oddest, most difficult year to budget because we just don't know what tomorrow is going to be, and we have to prepare for this as in the very best way that we can. And I don't think it's in our collective best interest to pillage the insurance reserve to try to bring something back. So if we had a lot more money in it, that would be a different discussion, but we don't.
Well, I wholeheartedly object to you using the word pillage.
Well,
I think of it more as a
Jenny, what you just listed was just about every cut that's been made so far. And if we were going to for all of those cuts, it would take a considerable amount of money, which
the things that I would like to add back total $67,433. I also think we can push the envelope more on the unexpended funds and dig deeper into the budget and look for things that we can apply money toward in a more specific way, so that we can again increase the amount of breathing room for the budget next year for COVID expenses, and also try to restore some of these cuts. Not all, but some, and have a discussion about which ones we would specifically want to see put back.
Well, you're going to have to give us some detail, because I don't know what you're bringing back that is worth 67,000 for openers. So what did you have?
SSES art is 19,877.
I'm sorry, SES what?
Art.
Okay.
Music is 31,403. And discrete math at Keller is 16,153. And unless I did my math wrong, I get 67,433.
Okay. So we do all of that, and we make all those decisions today, and we come to August and we find that we need a whole lot more money for COVID relief or COVID driven expenses. Then what do we cut to get those dollars back?
I think it's a discussion at the town level. I don't think the Board of Education should be expected to absorb the costs of this. Certainly not fully.
I can't, I mean, I can't speak for the town and I wouldn't, but if we've added back expenses that we have shown the world that we are prepared to cut as a one-time event because of COVID and not because we don't believe in those positions, and then we put them back and then we don't have the money to meet the COVID expenses, and so now we want to take what would be our problem and make it somebody else's, and I don't know.
Jeff, I object to the word "we" because when we went to at the last Board of Finance meeting, when they spoke to us about the kinds of, well, ultimately when they said they were going to cut the certain amount,
okay.
You presented, I think it was $241,000 in cuts that had not been discussed on the Easton Board of Ed level. So when you say "we," I object to that greatly, because we did not all, I'm looking at the budget right now on my phone, did not agree to all of those cuts.
What I did was I asked the superintendent to come up with a series of cuts that he felt would not damage programs and would not damage people that were currently on board with us.
And you presented them to the Board of Finance without first discussing them with the Easton Board of Education.
And that was a timing issue, not unusual. Never said at the meeting itself. At the meeting itself, I said that these are cuts that have not been discussed or approved by the Board of Education. But these were a first look from the superintendent's eyes. If we had to make cuts, what could we do that was not program or people driven?
That amount of money was at that meeting, the way you presented it, was taken from the budget that we had already agreed upon. And then the Board of Finance, as you'll recall, cut another 135,000 odd from that. So
correct.
Ultimately, they cut, or they were allowed to cut, nearly $400,000 from our budget. So when you use the word "we," I take great exception to that.
The part of it that stuck out for me is that those cuts were made because of COVID, or we're making these cuts because of COVID. The $300,000 that we need to cut because the Board of Finance slashed the budget down to that level has nothing to do with COVID. We're not cutting art and music and discrete math and the kindergarten hire office assistant. Looking at this list is not cuts so that we can cut COVID, so that we can fund COVID. These are cuts that were sent to us, that were given to us by the Board of Finance because that's what they thought was an appropriate budget for next year.
Just to be clear, the Board of Finance doesn't make any cuts other than dollars. We determine with the administration what to cut. So rather than rehash history, because if we were all at those meetings virtually, we all saw what happened, and we had an opportunity as a board collectively to come back and determine what was going to be cut starting at $1. You all had an opportunity to speak up. I included had an opportunity to speak up and say, if the number is X, what's going to be cut? We can start at 0, we can start at 241, and we can work our way up. But to put this on Jeff's shoulders, I don't think that's fair, gang. Sorry.
Randy, I don't think that's what anybody's,
Well, I disagree, Jenny. I disagree. I disagree. Katie has, she's directing it at Jeff, and I'm not comfortable with that. So why don't we just close that chapter out? And if we want to start from scratch tonight on what the budget's going to look like next year, that's a, you know, I think that's a challenge too far, frankly. And I'm in agreement with what Jeff said earlier in that if you show, you know, the town what you're cutting and then you rearrange everything, I'm not sure, and put things back in essentially. I'm not sure that's appropriate, but listen, we're having a good conversation until we sort of got sidetracked about what happened a month and a half ago. So why don't we go back to that and have a conversation if we want to continue to debate how we're going to spend $17 million next year. I'm fine with that. And I think we all agree that there's some sort of slush fund or otherwise that needs to be allocated toward potential, you know, healthcare PPE things going into next year. And it sounds like from Scott and others that we'll have clarity on that over the summer. So again,
we can definitely have more discussion about trying to, I don't even, the word slush fund. I mean, that's not even a positive term to use if we're certainly concerned about optics in the public. We have excess funds at the end of this year. We have now a higher projection even than a couple of weeks ago that we thought, and we have a higher than anticipated health insurance reserve going into next year. Those are unprecedented circumstances. And if we look at the budget for other areas that are typically appropriate uses of funds, capital improvements, equipment expenditures, repairs, et cetera, that we can do now, and we can get some of these programs back. Because cutting these programs in the eyes of the Board of Finance had nothing to do with COVID. It was an acceptable reduction to them, right, into our budget. And
Okay,
whether there was a pandemic or not, they would have done it.
That's fine. I'm not talking about cuts for COVID. They gave us a budget number. That's it. The town is looking at potential financial hardship because of COVID, and that may have influenced their decision to give us a $17 million budget. But aside from that, listen, if we're talking about prepaying 2021 expenses with unspent funds in this budget, and essentially redeploying those dollars next year toward things that we said we were going to cut a month ago, put it on the table. Tell us, you know, say what you want. Don't come here with problems and expect other people to solve them. Tell us what you would recommend.
I did the last time we had a meeting. I talked about iPads and technology and looking at all of those expenses that could potentially be tied to COVID. I'm not a buildings and grounds expert. I'm not an expert with the buildings. I would need help looking at that list and dialing down to what things could be applied now, so to loosen up the budget to get some of the programs back or to get some of the people back.
John, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so Randy, I agree, we should move forward. I think it's worth acknowledging the essence of what Katie is saying is real. We should, wherever possible, have the opportunity to discuss and do so publicly, that we're talking about our priorities and for the people that we represent, how we want to allocate the budget. It is not ideal for us to have a situation where the timing leads us to the Board of Finance needing us to give them a round of cuts that haven't been vetted with the board. That is not ideal. I don't think that Jeff did it with malice or any sort of sneaky intentions. It stinks that it happened, but I think we can all do our part to try to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. I think it's one of those, it is what it is.
May I?
Yeah.
I know how hard this is, and that's why we're really perseverating on it. The difference is now you have your dollar amount. If you were going to make any restorations, I would say it should be to the electricity, to the substitute lines, to the things that we said. The only reason that we're cutting this at all is to try to get a budget that the town can support in a time when we're in recession. Look at that list, that 241,000. We took, there's no logic behind why did I say, hey, let's reduce the substitutes by a certain percentage. Let's reduce the electricity. It's kind of betting that you'll be back in distance learning, which is not something we can say with a guarantee. I also, we're looking at this 76,000 like it's found money. $51,000 is towards a settlement in special education. You don't know that you won't have another one of those in October. There really is no cushion for your director of special services if she has to mediate another settlement. And I think it reminds me one of my dad's sayings, you know, I've cut this board 5 times and it's still not long enough. There's just no way that you can make $17 million into $18 million. The health insurance is one of the areas where you actually get some counsel. You pay Brown and Brown, who the insurance brokers, to give you a strong recommendation on how much money to put against. And so we're now in this budget. This budget contemplates you won't need substitutes. You won't be spending electricity. You'll find other savings. Maybe, you know, the bus costs will be different. You aren't going to have people putting claims against insurance. You aren't going to have special ed. There's just too many irresolvable, open-ended potential costs to you at this point. And so I guess I'm back to where I was a little while ago. You might have a more clear picture in 30 to 60 days of what you can do.
I agree with that. I actually think that's the suggestion here, is that, and I definitely wouldn't characterize it as a slush fund. It's $74,000 that you know, we know we're going to have to spend. It's not extra. It's already spent. We just don't know, and this is unprecedented times we're in right now. We can't know. Hartford tomorrow could say one thing, and 2 weeks later they could say a totally different thing, and we'd have to live by it.
That's right.
Well, do I totally misunderstand then that we have to allocate where the cut is coming from tonight? I mean, don't we have to have a this discussion is supposed to culminate in us voting on this list of cuts. Are you suggesting that can wait until the summer, or just that the excess decision can wait until the summer?
Well, the excess decision can wait until the summer.
Yeah, your task is to submit an itemized estimate to the Board of Finance, who then ultimately gives you your number, and the number they gave you is below what your estimate was. So at some point you have to reconcile that. You don't have to do it before the end of June per se. I mean, you have to do it at some point.
Which is what's driving my concern and desire to try to look deeper. And
this is now the third meeting that we've had this discussion. The first was the day after the Board of Finance cuts, which was which was the additional 136. A lot of emotion that day, and we thought it was better to take a breath and stand back. We had this discussion where this particular sheet that Scott put together for us at the last meeting, and it was difficult, it was hard, there was a lot of discussion, and I think we ended the meeting with, well, let's see if there's any additional public discussion or feedback before we make a decision. I have not myself heard any, but that doesn't mean that the other 5 people perhaps have, and if they have, we ought to discuss that. But now here we are again, and we're talking about well maybe we can delay this a little further. Well, it's up to you, but I don't know what you're doing. I don't know the message that you're sending to teachers. Am I going to be a 1.0 or a 0.6 or a 0.4 or a 0.2? Do I have a position as the discrete math teacher, or don't I? You can go up and down the list. The numbers aren't going to change. What we hear from Hartford probably will, but is it going to change in 2 weeks or 6 weeks? I mean, who the heck knows?
I think, Jeff, from the parliamentary procedure, you can either, a member of the board can pose a motion and seek a second, or you can table the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom.
I don't want to delay this. I want to consider.
Sorry.
I don't have any appetite for delaying it. I just don't have any interest in leaving these things in place when we have options that would alleviate those cuts being necessary.
Can I just remark that this is the first time that the Eastern Board of Ed is meeting since our budget has been finalized by the Board of Finance. Our previous meetings were before it was finalized by the Board of Finance.
I'd have to look back at the meeting notes. I don't think that's correct, Katie, but it could be.
I think it is. I think that's right.
Last week.
Yeah, I think that's right. They didn't close out the budget until last week.
Oh, well, that was as it related to the town budget. Yes.
Right. I think there was some concern, and I'll say I was among those concerns that they might go, you know what, we give you too much still, and I actually I meant to say this earlier, and I'm really sorry I didn't. I don't want to characterize the big bad Board of Finance. We have amazing people who sit on that Board of Finance and fight very hard for education. And even those who aren't necessarily in that camp, they're volunteering their time and energy. And I may not agree with all of them, but I don't want to disparage them.
Well, to move this forward to see where we are, entertain a motion to accept the cuts as presented, and that's looking at the Scott. I'll just call it the Scott report, and that and within that the office person, the 10-month position at SSES be restored, and that from the 2020, I'm sorry, from the current budget this year 1920, that we pay the 51K and the 23.6, as well as the $4,000 pressure washer.
Jeff, can you repeat the last part?
Pressure washer for 4,000.
No, right before that. I'm sorry.
Are
you specifying the special ed paint, the 50 and 25 amounts?
What's at the bottom?
Right, at the bottom of the page. In other words, that we accept the a motion to accept the board cuts as presented in Scott's report.
I'd like to make a motion that recommending the Scott report with the addition of the SSCS office assistant and the inclusion of the 4,000 pressure washer. And I'd also like to include the 4 line items, starting at the $1,400 item of professional development, textbooks for classroom libraries, summer curriculum salaries, and summer curriculum salaries, which total about 17,000. And I think that would bring the sum back to the town of around 500.
I would second that.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, I'd rather see programs restored than professional development and books. I think that the people, the head count is a huge concern each year. It's brought up, and again, this is not disparaging to the Board of Finance, but it is brought up every single year about the number of students goes down, the head count goes up. And, you know, we had a heck of a time this year, weren't able to secure enough funds to restore the media specialist. And every time we lose a person or a portion of a person, the next year trying to get it back is like climbing that hill 10 times over backwards. So in as much as we can allocate funds that do not eliminate positions and people that we're gonna have to then try to get back next year, I think that's the better way to go.
I agree.
Randy, can I, to your motion, I think there's one more thing to consider. And that is you're going to, in your, as part of the superintendent search, there's going to be a request for $4,000 from Easton to be taken out of, it's taken out of our funds for this year. So I think we would need to add, have that be a part of the motion as well. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but you know, but we will. That's what item E is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, Scott is so good at math. He's going to find that someplace between now and August 15th. So,
I mean, I think that item actually we were planning on using unexpended funds this year to pay for that contract. So I don't know that we actually have to make that a part of this motion.
You know what, John, you're right. That's good.
Okay.
Good point. Yeah, that's my mistake.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We've had some discussion. Is there any further discussion?
Do we have one motion on the floor or 2 motions? Because you made one as well, Jeff.
You can only have one motion.
no, Jeff was asking for a motion, Jenny. He can't make a motion. So I modified, I made my own motion, which was close to his.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of Randy's motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, we have 4 yeses. Noes?
No.
2 noes and no abstentions. Okay, so it passes that the Randy's motion for what the cuts will be. Let me see if I can. Okay, Jenny, do you have all that? I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
You do? Okay.
I'll go back to the recording for the wording, for the specific wording of the motion.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right, very good. Okay, next on the agenda is the election of officers. So the first office is, and well, it's just so that people understand. I know the board understands that this explanation is more for the folks that have tuned in. the policies of the board dictate that the chairmanship and the secretarial or the board secretary move back and forth from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, so on, every 2 years. So, and again, this is just for historical data, because then someone's going to say, well, then how has Parker been the board chair almost 7 years? I was elected the board chair in 2013 and served until 2015. In 2015, there was not a Democrat on the board who was interested in the position, so I kept the position from 15 to 17. In 17, it was the Republicans' position again, so I just stayed on and was the chair until November of 19. November of 19, there was it obviously had come up again. John Stinson had raised his hand as a Democrat expressing an interest in the position. In December of 19, we collectively decided that because we were doing the budget in a very different way, and I was the author of that idea, that I would play that through until the end, until the budget cycle was over, which I thought was going to be about 2 months ago. But and then after that had taken place, then we'd have the elections, and that way John, if he still was interested in the job, could start with a clean slate. So that's the history. So the two positions that are open for consideration is the board secretary and the board chairman. So to do the secretary first, do I have a nomination for board secretary?
I would like to nominate Gretchen Goldstein.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Any other nominations from the floor? Any other nominations from the floor? Okay. All in favor of Gretchen becoming the board secretary signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay. 6-0. Gretchen, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is the chairmanship of the Board of Education. Do I hear a nomination for the chairman position?
I'd like to nominate John Stinson for the chair position.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any other nominations from the floor? Any other nominations from the floor? Okay, I'm getting tired of saying that too. So if there aren't, all in favor of John Stinson becoming chairman of the Easton Board of Education, signify by raising your hand. That's wonderful. 6-0. John, congratulations. Gretchen, congratulations. You are now the chairman of the board, and this meeting is now yours.
Thank
So
you, Jeff.
take it away to the finish line.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we have item D on the agenda to get to. We're actually going to punt on part of this, appointing members to the Joint Calendar Committee. I'm currently slated in that spot, and I would intend to remain there. Certainly, board members, if you have a particular interest in the Joint Calendar Committee, just you can contact me and we can discuss, but I would plan to stay on there. The Joint Negotiating Committee, we plan to hold on that appointment. We are also going to need a charge for the Joint Negotiating Committee and want to make sure that we're preparing it properly. So we're going to take that at the July meeting. That takes us to agenda item E, which is not on the printed agenda, but we talked about for the purposes of allocating funds, which now, Randy, you have prepared a motion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you care to make that motion?
Sure. Chairman Stinson, I'd like to make a recommendation to engage JE Consulting and Dr. Joseph Arardi Jr. to assist the Easton, Reading, and Region 9 Boards of Education with the formal process of hiring a new superintendent And the Easton Board of Education shall incur up to $4,000 in fiscal year 2020, which represents a pro rata portion of the search consultant's fee and expenses.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
Second.
I finally got to do, I finally got to make them so excited.
Good. Discussion?
I mean, if let's see, the subcommittee, basically representatives from all three boards. We've had a couple of meetings. John has joined me and Gretchen on the subcommittee, and we've made progress with sort of outlining the process and discussed engaging a consultant to assist us with the whole process, engaging the community with focus groups, helping us with the posting, making sure the posting goes out as far and wide as we think is appropriate. The same token, to help us as best we can accelerate the process, given everything we've talked about tonight and then some, to hopefully allow Dr. McMorran to ease into retirement sometime before Christmas, right, Tom? So, yeah. So anyway, so that's what we've been up to. The two other boards will hopefully make a similar motion and approve it, and we'll be able to engage Dr. O'Reilly as soon as next week is the thought.
Yeah, I believe Reading is meeting Thursday night, and the Region 9 board, I think, is meeting Friday night specifically to approve this specific motion. So we spoke with a number of consultants, and they were all very impressive. We would have liked to hire them all, but I think we coalesced around Dr. Arardi, who I think is going to do a great job for us.
Randy, what kind of a time frame did he give? Was he? Rumor has it that it was an aggressive one, and that would certainly be to our advantage.
He plans to have a new superseded by July 1st. We think that's kind of aggressive. No, he outlined essentially, 2.5 months. Now that a lot of things have to line up. So I think that's very aggressive, but he's sort of a can-do person and personality. And I think, the subcommittee is going to allocate a ton of time to this, probably a meeting a week, if not more, for the near term. And we're going to, we've hit the ground running. And so we're hoping by the start of school, but that's very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 6-0. Very good. Motion passes. Okay, that moves us on to reports, district administrative reports.
I think that would be Scott.
I think that's right.
I don't have anything in particular to call out with the budget object summary. We talked about the 600K anticipated unexpended. So no news there. And also happy to take any questions if there are any on the budget object summary itself. Transfers report, I think, is pretty straightforward. And the health reserve report, we largely covered earlier as well. I am anticipating a 700K reserve. We had a very good month in May. My anticipation is we're going to see it tick back up in June. I think things are opening up, and certainly just from my own circle of acquaintances, people are certainly undertaking medical appointments in the month of June, which they weren't previously. So we may see that come back up a bit in June, but we have seen that anticipated slowdown from COVID, which, as Brown & Brown has said to us, is a delay, not an elimination.
Any questions for Scott? Very good, thank you. Board of Education committee reports. I think Randy, you probably just gave the update for the search committee. I don't believe we've had any other meetings of any of the subcommittees. Okay, good. That moves us on to public comment. As usual, please, if you'd like to comment, members of the public, you can raise your hand by showing the participants window in Zoom and then clicking the button that indicates to raise your hand. Or if that's cumbersome for you on your device, feel free to just wave at us, enable your video and just wave at us on the screen. Okay, I see Adam Parker. Adam, you're unmuted. And I'm sorry, we forgot to do this at the beginning. If you can just say your name and the street you live on in Easton.
Sure, Adam Parker, 70 Wedgewood Drive in Easton. Keep it quick again. Jeff, just want to, I guess, thank you for all the work that you've done. Glad to see that you're moving into a different position, but also that John and Gretchen are moving into some seats. Congratulations to you two. And I feel as a member of the community that we're in good hands and the leadership will continue. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Any additional comment, public comment? Good. I see. Sorry, I can't actually make sense of the name. I'm gonna unmute. It was a Jay Akma. And apologies if that's somebody's last name or first name that I'm pronouncing.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. Hi, Anna Mendez, Brookside Drive. And I just wanted to mention the disappointment with 5th and 8th graders with the graduation ceremony and not doing anything for these kids. Everything that has been done for them has come through the PTO with the yard signs and that sort of thing. Every other town is doing something for the kids. Bunch of parents have emailed both superintendent and the Board of Education, and with a plan of no contact, just a wave. Parents are picking up belongings. I've had to do it at SES, and my appointment is in a couple of weeks for my 8th grader as well. And I don't know, and I don't understand the real lack of compassion for these 5th and 8th graders and having a send off for them. I understand teachers have advocated for it as well, and just want to have an opportunity to express frustrations from many parents in recognizing our 5th and 8th graders when Newtown, Fairfield, Weston, Trumbull, every surrounding town is doing something for their kids.
Anna, thank you for your comments. Any additional comments from the public? Okay. Board member comment? Jeff?
Yes, I just want to again thank Tom McMorrin, 13 years, building principal, superintendent. Talk about a year for a send-off. Boy, this is it. But your leadership and your friendship has been greatly appreciated by me, and I know by many other people, and you will be sorely missed.
Katie?
I'd like to thank the administrators and all of the teachers for dealing with this crazy situation that we're all in so well. So and I hope you all have a wonderful summer. Thanks.
Jenny?
Yes, a couple of things. One, I just wanted to acknowledge all of the comments, phone calls, the conversations regarding the 5th and the 8th grade celebration. I don't think there is a lack of sympathy from the board or for anyone making these difficult decisions. I think under different circumstances, everybody would be shouting from the rooftops. I don't disagree with you that we could have, I wish that it had been an agenda item tonight. I wish that we could have possibly talked about a way to do something for the kids. But I also understand that Tom and others who are overseeing the town see every person who's working in our district and every child as an extended family. And just like none of us would go ahead and make a risk, like Jeff mentioned earlier, or John mentioned earlier today, you know, the risk is not zero. And given that it's not zero, you know, that gives great pause. And there are a lot of things to consider that, you know, even somebody who's, you know, someone like myself who's been on the board for a few years, I have conversations with Jeff or Tom or someone else, and they bring up things that I didn't even think of. What I would like to see or hear from our administration or folks in town is discussions about something in the future. The focus seems to be on, are we going to do this right now or are we not? And everybody's really upset and really hurt about us not doing this thing for the kids right now. But just like budget decisions over the summer are going to be fluid, I hope that maybe we can shift our thinking towards August or September and a welcoming ceremony instead of a concluding ceremony where these kids can get together and the community can celebrate their past accomplishments, but do something that brings them together as a group, sharing a common experience that they can look back on as a milestone. So if we could try to maybe shift our thinking away from the sadness about losing this graduation ceremony and think about what we can do for them in the future when it's 100% safe to do so and everybody is buying into it. I hope that those conversations will take place as we are going to have July and August meetings.
Thank you. Randy?
I don't do this very much, but I'd like to thank the administration. I hope you guys know that I appreciate you guys every time we get together and even the days that we don't get together. But I don't always say it at these meetings because they last a long time, but you're very much appreciated. Tom, you will be missed tremendously. You've taught me a ton in my 6+ years. And Jeff, you're the only chairman that I know. I don't know who this guy John Stinson is. I'm going to give him a chance, but I don't know. I'm a little scared. But other than that, thank you all. Have a good night, and I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you, Randy. Gretchen?
I also want to comment. Obviously, all the board members have seen all of the emails from the community members who have children in 5th and 8th grade. I also have a child in 5th grade, and I'm really torn. I also have a husband who goes to the hospital and sees COVID patients up front. And while I do think the situation is changing somewhat, and do think that possibly there could be a wave and it doesn't have to be something that is too risky. It's true that there's just so many unknowns. And I also agree with what Jenny said, you know, when you have conversations with different board members or different administrators, you do get other information, and there's just so many things to consider. And it's just really unfortunate. And that's really all that I can say. And yes, I agree that maybe we can look forward and look at this in a different light. I know that doesn't really help, and I agree. I mean, I'm going through it also. I'm going through it on both sides. I know that's not conclusive, but it's just what I'm thinking and how I'm honestly feeling.
Thank you, Gretchen. You know, thank you to all the board for your thoughtful comments. I'll make it quick. Definitely have a lot of compassion for what it means to be a parent of a 5th grader wanting to mark that occasion. And I hope that we can continue the conversation and talk about creative ways. I think Jenny's point is spot on. You know, creative ways that we can celebrate and sort of mark the occasion, you know, in the future a bit. So I'm looking forward to those conversations, and I think we can have that dialogue with the community in the not too distant future. I want to say quickly, thank you to every one of the board members. I adore this board. I learn so much from all of you every time we meet. You should see Randy as one of the co-chairs of the selection committee, and Gretchen's contribution in that selection committee. There's a tremendous amount of work to do there, and we're doing it. And there's great leadership coming from Randy on that committee. That committee, which has been charged to fill the shoes of someone who you couldn't possibly find a better human being to sit in the role. Tom McMorrin, you are one of my heroes, and it's a pretty short list. And I'm going to say it's Howard Zinn, my dad, and you. So, if that means anything to anybody, it should. I think you're a very good man who's been put into impossible circumstances and done good things for this community, and I appreciate it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank you all. We'll continue to associate for several months, I think, but I do very much admire this board. I love the way you're honest with each other and that you constantly refocus around what's best for your kids within the context of your town. And I should say to Jeff that my debt to Jeff Parker really cannot be quantified in the last 5 years and the 6 years that we've worked together. His dedication and devotion to you, the people of this town and the boys and girls of this town has been exemplary and in my experience, unparalleled in the service of public volunteers to the well-being of the whole. And John Stinson, don't be afraid. Jeff Parker has put in dozens of hours a month. And when there's been something difficult to do, he's taken it on with courage and conviction. And when there's things that he's needed me to hear that he didn't think needed to be held in public, believe me, he's been as tough a boss as he's been supportive, a fellow and a friend. So if we're identifying people we admire tonight, John, certainly Jeff Parker's on my list. And
nice.
I also don't want any of the unhappiness about the decision about the 5th and 8th grade leveled at members of the board. It's a decision that I made based on consultation with the health experts in the region and based on my best judgment. I think we are, as I've said to many of you, take a look at a map of Fairfield County and the infection rates, and you're going to see that Easton and Reading have the least. And you've been so good about the discipline of social distancing. And I've repeatedly said I'm hopeful that we can do something in the middle or the end of the summer. So if there is anger, you really should direct that at me and me alone, based on my best estimates and judgment about the well-being of the entire community. And listen, I've got 2 kids of my own, and it's not lack of compassion for 5th grade or 8th grade or the 4th grade over in Reading. It's actually the opposite. It's me looking at the entire community from our 3-year-olds to the teacher in her mid-70s and everybody in between. So I know it's disappointing, and I acknowledge that, and I recognize that, and I'll even own that. But you're a great town, and you do things that you think are best and right. And if you didn't, you wouldn't have these conversations. So thank you for everything, really.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Second from Katie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Aye.
9:47. Thank you, everybody.